Aaron Sandlands, boots off, walking freely. Is everything going according to plan? And we're still looking, is it round 19? We're looking at him being back?
Yeah, look, it's hard to preempt. We'll know a lot more when he starts to run and jump. That's probably when you get a better feel for the situation. The best part about it this time in is that he hasn't had the moon boot on, so his leg is not withered away, as in his quad. And so hopefully that would support it a lot more.
When will he start doing that?
I'd say middle of next week.
And Dave Mundy, how's he?
Dave, once again, has got his moon boot off, and I would envisage that he'll start to run later next week as well.
So, and he's basically on target?
He's actually probably maybe a week ahead of where we first thought.
So that's around 19 as well?
Yeah, probably around 20, yeah, somewhere around there.
Barlow this week?
Yep.
How's he progressed?
Like he's been disappointed that he's missed the last 3 weeks and can't understand why. So we did some aggressive training on Monday and he was fighting the fire.
And Subin looked like he was back up and fit on Monday?
He is, yeah. He will play, it just depends where.
Just back on Barlow, do you have to reassess what role you use him at after pulling up sore after one game?
Well, he'd actually played a couple of games in the lead up to that, so at waffle level. So I'd like to think that he'd be a lot better in second up, if you know what I mean, in preparation.
Subin and McPhee, do they play for Claremont?
Not necessarily, no.
So it's a pretty big risk. They've both been out for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing the same thing with Tendai, after missing 10 weeks, and Ibbotson was the same. Both those guys are really professional in the way that they have done their preparation in regards to rehab, and it'll be only probably touch and maybe a little bit of match fitness as to whether we play them or not.
Coming off the bye, how do you discipline the players not to look too far ahead, because it's a pretty tough draw, very tough draw.
I mean, it is for everyone. It's interesting how people want to have a look at our draw, and I know they're looking at other teams' draws, but it's what you make of it. The injury toll is mounting right across the board. A lot of soft tissue injury, and then structural injury. So we'll see how it plays out. That's what we look forward to.
Well, you're saying other teams are...
the whole competition, yeah.
And you're getting players back.
Interchange rule and sub rules contributed to the soft tissues?
I mean, I mentioned it 2 weeks ago, but there appears to be a lot more soft tissue happening right now. And it'll be interesting to see the AFL's findings at the end of the year as to what it's actually contributed to.
Could you actually be in a good position at the moment getting players back, obviously when other teams might be struggling?
That's right, and the real trick to it all is that you've got to make sure that your team or your players are match hardened and they can sustain the duration of a game. And that's the dilemma that we'll have in coming weeks with guys that we're possibly going to introduce into the team.
You must feel fairly relieved, I suppose, that you've managed to hold on to that spot in the 8, given what you've gone through in terms of injuries and things.
Yeah, I mean, you can never be satisfied in this industry, but at least we've given ourselves a chance. Yeah.
On the radio the other night, you said it's going to be a case of who dares wins on the run home to the season. What did you mean by that?
Well, as I said, I'm not sure if you discount Collingwood and, say, Geelong, then Hawthorn and Carlton, they're getting a lot of injury themselves. And then the rest of us are in that pack, and it's an even pack. You're seeing the Bulldogs and St Kilda starting to launch. Momentum's a lot, confidence is a lot. It's a fickle game, and it becomes very interesting on a weekly basis what happens now, and there'll be pressure associated with individuals, teams along the way, and it's how you handle that.
Do you see maybe a spot inside the top 4 opening up if cards fall your way?
I mean, we're not interested in thinking about that. We're trying to sustain a period of this competition where we can stamp ourselves.
Sydney this week play hard contested football. Has there been any extra focus on the stoppage work this week?
Yeah, there has. When you get a chance to train harder than you normally would because you had the bye, physically I'm talking about, then that's been a real bonus from our point of view.
Could you see maybe this week Pav and Woods going head to head?
Well, once again, it depends on where those two individuals play. They're both great leaders and game breakers, so if that's up to them if they want to put goods on Pavlich.
Where do you see Pavlich playing that?
Where he has basically all midfield forward.
Do you need to structure your forward line differently at the SCG because it's shorter? Like if he does play forward, it's a different sort of forward role than maybe he would play at Patterson Stadium? Yeah,
I mean it's interesting at SCG, and if you play traditionally centre half forward, the ball can quite often go over your head on a shorter ground. So yes, we will. You'll see our forward line in time, if not this week, will change a lot in the demographics of who plays down there.
Is the size of the ground a factor when you look at Subban and McPhee? It sounds like you're seriously considering them to play against the Swans. It's not going to be so much about running, more about around a contest this weekend. Would they be more likely to be played in this environment first up than they would, say, if the game was at Patterson Stadium?
Possibly. And then you've got the adage of, what the game will do to them if you do play them the following week. You do take them on, one of our longest trips. So we've got to weigh all that up. And when you play the Swans, there's a lot of stoppages, so there's a lot of downtime. It's all of that. So, yeah. Hence, selection might go a little bit longer.
Can you afford to bring them both back?
Possibly not.
Is there one slightly ahead of the other in terms of fitness or touch?
Well, I'd say McPhee's probably ahead of Subban.
Just back to the changing demographic of the forward line, which players can we expect to see maybe going forward that haven't been there so far this year?
If we were to play a guy like McPhee, for instance, then he would be an obvious choice. If you go back and have a look at his first 7 or 8 weeks in the forward line, one of our best pressuring forwards. Hit the scoreboard, but not as accurate as we would have liked. So that could be an option. You've already seen Tendai go down there in the last couple of weeks. In coming weeks, when maybe Sandlands comes back, you might see him down there a little bit more too. So.
Mark, not that long ago you were a brilliant 20-year-old footballer at Essendon. What would your reaction have been to $1 million being offered to yourself or one of your teammates who's 20 as well, and the pressure that puts on the club Essendon to have to come up with an offer to try and keep him?
Yeah, I saw it happen actually in the old Eddleston days and the Skates days when Sydney and Brisbane had the big checkbooks, and to see players being offered big money, and they're at various stages in their careers, whether they were 20-year-olds or a little bit older, and perhaps it was their last contract. It's always interesting to sit back and watch and see what happens. And now we find ourselves in a different situation with 2 new clubs coming into the competition, more money in their salary cap. And a lot of the younger players are being targeted because they're trying to get the timing of their group right, as in because they get all the early draft picks, and so hence they tend to stay away from 25-year-old plus players. On the occasion they would get a player that was older than that. It's a lot of pressure to put on a player if he hasn't established himself yet. And I'm not talking about GWS, I'm just talking about a young player, and because we've got free agency just around the corner as well, so it's going to happen more. And I think the decision that a young player and the management group have got to make is based on a number of things. If he takes the deal, then he's going to be subject to enormous expectation and pressure. He'll be targeted by the opposition, and then he'll have to deal with being probably the face of the football club. Then the other dilemma is if he doesn't take it, but the club that he's at pay him somewhere near that, then that'll put pressure on their salary cap, and perhaps they have to make decisions on other players at their football club because of that. So however the offer gets out in the face of the media, I think they're playing a very delicate game. Because as we've seen, there's the scrutiny and the focus that's on the player that's involved in it is on a weekly basis until such time it comes to the end of the year when the final decision is made. Now, it might be made before that, I'm not sure. But I think it's an interesting scenario, and the tactics of the club and the management and the deal and the money that's involved. If it was me, I'd be tending to keep it very much in-house.
What are your thoughts on the way the game's going in terms of free agency coming in, etc.?
I think it creates an interesting environment. I mean, we've all, as players and coaches, if you've been involved in the last 30 years, loyalty and trust has always been high on the agenda. But and then the ultimate sacrifice that you wanted to make as a footballer or a coach was to make sure that you played in a successful team. And that's another decision that all these players are going to have to make, and not just necessarily based around money.
Is it good for the game? AFL has created this situation.
Well, they have. Yeah, I mean, it creates an interesting landscape, and maybe we're getting, in these sort of areas where the times are changing. We talk about new generation. Do they think differently? It's all of that. But I think the principles of how we thought and how we were judged was right.
Is it difficult to come to terms with being an old school player, you know what I mean, coming from that sort of background to be able to deal with this?
Sometimes it is when you try to talk to your players if they're involved, and but I don't think necessarily that I've had to. I mean, Warnock was interesting. He became homesick, which you can understand at times. It's become an interstate game, Australia-wide game, whereas going back then it was more traditionally a little bit more just Victorian. But so there are different reasons why.
What would you have done as a 20-year-old? What would Essendon?
I would have. I mean, I got approached on the way, but in the end, you backing what you think is right. In those days, managers didn't have a big influence on your decision. It was basically your decision. They had a little bit of an influence, but not too much. Then you talk to your family about it. But the end result is, are you going to play the game for X amount of years, and are you going to get success? And is this the right club for you? Is it the right coach? All of those things. Because the unknown factor is that if you make a decision to go, you don't necessarily know the culture, you don't know the environment, you don't necessarily know your teammates, and that can be quite awkward to go to another club and play with guys that you don't necessarily know too much of.
If your son was 20, what would your advice be to him?
I know they got asked to, I think the manager of one of the players that we've been overseeing. I would instill a belief that he would be based on success, where he felt the most success was going to be. For him personally, and then for him from a team aspect, yeah.
Mark, is Sydney's home ground advantage diminished a little bit because of the way the game's played now? It's not a full field game anymore, it's basically played in areas of the game, in areas of the ground.
Well, I often wonder why we play on different dimensions of grounds, and why it's not totally sacrosanct across the board as the same dimensions of a ground. I think it creates a fascinating outlook from an advantage point of view and a disadvantage point of view, and to see how your players react to a different area of the ground. I don't see it as a big issue. You'd like to think that players have a better read on the game no matter what sort of space is there or is not there. Elite players will always find a way. Elite teams will.